Well, hello, family. Thank you so much for joining me tonight or today, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for being a part of this special edition of Intersection Podcast. Intersection, no article. Uh, I don't know if anybody's called that. So, thank you so much for being with us. I am tonight joined by three outstanding young men who are fathers because this episode is a special edition for Father's Day. If you saw the Mother's Day edition, then you know that was a great edition. And so now we're doing an edition for fathers. We're going to honor fathers. We're going to talk to people who are fathers and or who are mentors to other people's kids. And so we're going to be doing that tonight. Before we begin, I want to send a special shout out to my daddy, Edward Anderson, known as Ed to some people, known as Man Anderson because he has huge hands, hands that I remember very well because he didn't play. Okay, and also known as Mr. Anderson to the people, the kids in the neighborhood, because my father was very well respected. Now, let me say this also about my dad. I thank him so much because he was stern when he needed to be stern, but he was also very tender. And so I'm very grateful for his fatherhood and his fathering of me. And I know I speak for my twin, my beloved and my twin who's passed away. I speak for her on behalf of how great of a father Ed Anderson was and is to me and was to her. And so, thank you all so much for being with me again tonight. I'm going to bring on my guests. Thank my guests so much for being with us. All three of these young men are fathers and they are mentors. So tonight we're going to be talking about what it means to be a father, the responsibility of being a father, and the rewards of being a father and or a mentor. There is such a misconception, particularly in American culture, that black men are absent, when in fact black men are very present in the lives of so many kids, so many children, and those children that they fathered, and also children that they mentor. And so I want to really deal with the stigma of that and kind of break the stigma, change the perception that black men are absent because black men are very present. And we are so grateful to all that they pour into us, all that they've given to us. And so we wanted to say to our fathers, Happy Father's Day. Thank you so much for all that you do for your children and for your community. So I am joined by three great men, one of whom I must confess, I remember the day he was born. So that should give you some indication of how old I am. But he's grown into a great. I mean, I respect this young man. He is my cousin, and I am just in awe of so many of the things that he's doing as a family man and as a career man, professional. He's a travel nut. I use that term, Ken. Sorry. He travels, and I just enjoy seeing so much of his travels that he puts out on social media. So I really have a great admiration for all three of these men, and so I really have a great admiration for Ken, who's my cousin. So I want to start with each one. I want to start with Ken. Tell us who you are, and tell us what your father's name that you're honoring, or a father figure, or a mentor that you're honoring tonight for this episode. Thank you.
Thank you, Boomy. My name is Ken Barfield. I'm out of Miami, Florida. And like my cousin, most of my cousins, my family stay in Albany, Georgia, or out of Georgia. So I'm very close with all of my families on both sides. Not gonna be long-winded because I know we have a large panel, so I'm gonna try to keep my responses on certain questions very brief. Father, I'm honoring on this particular panel was two of them. My biological father who passed when I was 13, Willie C. Barfield Jr., and then it would be my uncle who passed most recently in December of last year, um, Barry Barfield. So I want to honor both of those, and that's the two people I will probably talk most about during this panel and this podcast.
All right, thank you so much. And Mr. Dr. John Williams, please share with us who you are honoring tonight.
Yes, good evening, and thank you, Boomy, for allowing me to be a part of this wonderful opportunity, especially since you're honoring Black fathers and fathers in general. This is a wonderful initiative. My name is John Williams. I am a native of Albany, Georgia, and I'm a professor of biology here at Albany State University. Um, when I think about the men in my life that have been father figures, I've been fortunate to be surrounded by a number of strong Black male figures throughout my family and in my community. But the two that I want to honor the most would be my brother Michael Williams. He has been my biggest supporter and one of my first protectors, particularly when I was young and might have ran into a bully or two. He was the one that would come and have my back. But most of all, I want to honor my father, John Williams Sr. He's a man who taught me, regardless of perfection or imperfection, love and respect go a long way in terms of helping others to become the best that they can be. And he's always been a loving and respectful man, and he's raised me to be the same. And so I appreciate him for everything that he's done for me.
Wow. And Mr. Percy Chastang, I can tell you a story about Percy. Percy, let me stick this in. When I first became a freshman at Albany State, I spent a lot of time with Percy because he was a leader on the campus, and so I spent a lot of time in his study groups. So, Mr. Chastain, thank you so much for being here. You gotta unmute yourself. I think you muted yourself.
All right. Thank you for having me, Boomy. Sorry about that. And good afternoon to the other two gentlemen. It's always good to be amongst positive Black male fathers and mentors. My name is Percy Chastang. I currently reside in Valdosta, Georgia. I am a native of Albany, Georgia, proud graduate of Albany State, like Boomy said, back in the good old days. Um, the two fathers that I would like to honor for this panel is my father, my who I was named after, Percy Chastang Sr., who is a double retiree. He was a Marine drill sergeant, and he also retired a second time from Procter and Gamble. And the second would be my uncle on my maternal side, J.T. Johnson, who was a civil rights lieutenant and worked very closely with Dr. Martin Luther King and inspired me to just be a man of the people. This is an extremely personal topic and panel for me. I'm a father of four, and it's just good to be with you this evening and, to chop it up with the brothers and to honor fathers and mentors.
So, all right. So one of the things and again, thank you all so much for being with us tonight. One of the things I really want to talk about from the very beginning is what has been, and I'll start with Dr. Williams, John Williams. What has been your greatest reward as it relates to being a father? What would you say has been your greatest reward?
Um, I thank you for that question, and I hate to take it in this direction because I have to do this. But the story of me becoming a father started with some tragedy. So those who know me know that I lost my first child during the birthing process, and up to that point, I never thought I was going to be a father. And so, um, as we were preparing for him to come, I realized how much love I had in me, how much selflessness I had in me, and how much I was ready to, be there, be the guide and the father figure for little John. You know what I mean? And then when that didn't happen, I was really really hurt for a while. And then I had the blessing of having my daughter, Faven. And what I realized with Faven, and the biggest joy and the biggest blessing that has come out of Faven being in my life, is that I realized that one, my child doesn't expect me to be perfect. My child just expects me to be her dad. Um, she loves on me. I love on her. I'll do anything for her. And just the fact that I'm able to be selfless with someone just as much as I'm also selfless with my wife. Let me just put that out there. But since we're talking about our children, just being able to be selfless in the protection and care of a precious angel that God gave me, that especially in light of the first time not going the way we wanted it to go, that has been the biggest blessing, and that's the biggest joy that I run into every single day when I'm with my daughter.
Wow, that's so powerful. Ken, tell me what is your greatest joy about being a father?
So I think he touched on that a big point about the selflessness of becoming a father. I think that's a tremendous point, and I think that's what most fathers or most males who love being a father. I think that's what the approach or how we feel wholeheartedly about fatherhood. I think I've been a father since I was 19. I had my son when I was in high school, in 12th grade. He is turning 24 this year, my oldest. And my wife is pregnant now with one that's not even here yet. So I have a big age gap between my kids. So all I've known for most of more than I've been alive, right, is being a father and providing to my kids. So I think that has taught me to be very not only independent but very selfless as far as giving back to others around me. So I think my approach in fatherhood from from day one when I was in high school and I had to go to football practice and then go to work, get a job, and I had to get an automobile and pay to get pick my kid up after school to daycare, stuff like that. At a very early age, it put me ahead of a lot of people that were my same age. So when I got to college and when I went to university, my mindset was so much more advanced than a lot of other individuals because what fatherhood did to me. So I think that's one of the most impactful things for me when it comes to fatherhood, and that's what have kind of melded into me into who I am now, and who I am in my 40s.
Percy, tell me what is your greatest joy? Because I know you
I
also,
think
if I'm not mistaken, you're also a grandfather. So what has been your greatest joy in terms of being a father?
I am a grandfather, and I appreciate you calling me a young father in the beginning. That made me chuckle. I think I'm the oldest on this panel, but these young brothers hit the nail on the head in terms of what the gift or the joy was. You know, black males traditionally, Boomy, as an educator, I'm sure you know this, are tactile kinesthetic by nature. We can hear and we can see, but when we get an opportunity to actually do and touch and feel, we come into our own. And I think the birth of our children, it's been common on this panel that it just unlocked that capability within us. And for me, it just allowed me to begin to come into an understanding that there was so much more to me, so much more ability to sacrifice, to love, to expand, to grow, to change, to give, to sacrifice. I could go on that I most likely would have never been able to tap into before 1988 when my oldest child was born. I'm a father of four. My oldest is 38, and I have 33, 25, and my youngest son is 20, and I have three grandchildren as well. And so it's just, that journey started in 88, and there hadn't been a day, a month, maybe even a week where I hadn't had to grow or learn something as a father, just a bit more. And that's a joy and that's a reward.
And it's interesting that because that you say that all three of your responses are very interesting because you gave very personal reasons as to why fatherhood is a great joy to you, which means which is leading me to want to follow up with this question: how did fatherhood, or how has fatherhood changed the way you see yourself? How has that happened? I mean, how has fatherhood played a role in how you see yourself? I'll start with John Williams here.
Um, that's a question that I don't think I've ever really taken full stock in, or actually thought about until you asked it. But I can say that fatherhood has allowed me to realize that I'm stronger than I really thought I was. Um, and it's because the outcomes of my decisions, the outcomes of my choices now impact more than just me. And when it was just me and I was only concerned about me, then there was some decisions I'd make that may have been reckless or may have been a little selfish. And so because of that, I was willing to take responsibility for the outcomes, whether they were good or bad. But now I realize that, in addition to my wife, and I want to make sure I stress that I don't don't want to I don't want it to seem as if my daughter is the only one that is really helping me to understand this. But um, with my daughter, I realize that I have the strength to be able to not only make wiser decisions, but also to be able to be that protector and be that defender and be that support and be everything I need to be for my daughter. It's kind of like if you ever watch X-Men or if you ever read comic books, some people have superpowers, but it takes a key event, sometimes tragedy, sometimes a positive event for those powers to be unlocked. That's what it is. Realizing that everything that I didn't know I could do, I can do now, because I have someone that's depending on me to do it, whether I want to or not.
And that's so that is very telling for me, because I'm thinking about what you said, John, and then think about what Ken said, and I want to kind of follow up with this as well, uh, along the same lines of questioning. Uh, Ken, you mentioned that you were 19 years old when you first became a father. Um, so often people, well, it's in our nature as humans. We learn about ourselves along the way, or something happens, like John mentioned. Something happens, and then it kind of catapults you into stepping up or stepping back, or taking responsibility, taking charge, growing, developing, or it stunts a person's growth. Would you say, Ken, that you were at 19, which is this is probably going to be I'm not. I don't want to assume that the answer to this question is no. I wasn't ready. So but I do want to know. Uh, at 19, when you became a father, when you found out you were going to be a father, were you prepared for that, or do you feel that
Uh,
you had been prepared for it by your father?
oh, that's a good question. I would say I was absolutely not prepared to be a father at 19. I would say I was very selfish, and well, rightfully so, because I was a teenager. Right? I was into athletics. I was pushing both a track and football scholarship. I was the man on campus, right? I was the ladies' man, so I had girls. I was talking to them. I was very selfish in that mindset where I was the most important thing in my circle, along with my mom, right, and my siblings. Um, so I would say definitely I was not prepared. However, I would say to your question, Mumi, did my father prepare me for fatherhood? I think he did, and I think what ended up happening was the minute that I realized I was going to become a father, something inside me kicked on right away. Right? It's like an instinct that you have when you have been raised the right way by another male. It gives you it gives you that ideal of supporting, like a supporting cast. I want to be there for people around me. And the minute that I knew that I was having an offspring, all I wanted to do was protect. I wanted to provide. I wanted to be successful. I didn't even think about college. I mean, I was getting college offers, but I didn't even think about college actually accepting the offer or pursuing college until I realized I was a father. Then I took college serious. So a lot went into like the preparation. Wasn't prepared, but I would say the ideal father that prepared me along with my father's guidance when I was younger.
Percy, tell me the same question. Were you prepared? And if not, or if you were prepared, what role did your father play in helping you to prepare for fatherhood?
Boom, I was not, and I laugh when Ken said absolutely was not. I was 22 when I first became a father. However, my father had provided the example of being a provider, of a work ethic, but the emotional availability, I did not, and I'm not ashamed to say it. Me and my father are much closer these days, but he was a provider and not necessarily one that was going to talk or, a nurture in that sense. And so I'm going to answer this question from the point of my role as a mentor for other young fathers. What the mistake I made as a young father was I focused a lot more on outcomes. And so when you ask, how did I see myself? I probably would answer it realistically as somewhat of a failure. I had two children from two different women and wasn't prepared, didn't honor them the way that I should, wasn't mature, wasn't economically stable. And so I began to kind of get inside my own head. And I see a lot of young men in situations, that aren't going well with the baby's mother, kind of get inside their own head and begin to second guess themselves and see themselves as failures because they're not providing economically or whatnot. And so, what I encourage those young fathers to do is to focus on the effort and not so much the outcome, because that's, I think, where the coming into your own as a father is found in the root effort and not necessarily evaluating yourself, because sometimes it's just too early. You hadn't learned enough. You really hadn't, come into your own. And so, I just encourage young fathers to focus on the effort and the outcomes, they'll be what they'll be.
Interesting you would say that, which leads me to about mentoring, because you're talking about mentoring uh, fathers, young fathers. Um, the stigma that goes along, you know, that I have really seen is not necessarily true. There's not, in my view, not saying that there are black fathers, that all black fathers are present. I'm not saying that. However, when you're talking to young fathers, or young men who are aspiring to be fathers, what are some of the lessons that you are sharing with them about um, how to be a good father, how to, not a perfect father, but an effective father, how to be, or how to be a gentleman as a young man, but perhaps as a boy, maybe a boy that's not even thinking about fatherhood. But how do you? What are some of the lessons that you're sharing with some of the males that you're mentoring? I start with Percy.
I'll I'll be real quick with this one, and I'm sure you'll appreciate it, Boomy, as a student of history. It's rooted in understanding our journey in this country, and that the Black fatherhood has never been and does not continue to be an easy task, and that there are obstacles, intentional and unintentional, in that path toward that. And so I think it takes a realistic assessment approach of where we are, what our history is, and what those forces are, sometimes in our own communities, in our families, sometimes in our own heads, but definitely in our societal structures, and acknowledging those, identifying those, but also developing that self belief through action that they can be overcome.
Wow, John.
That was powerful, and along those same lines, one of the things that I had to do was and one of the things that I share with other fathers, and I'm a young father, like in terms of how long I've been a father. My daughter's only 6, so I've only been doing this for about 6 years, right? But I have a number of friends in my circle who are also fathers and so forth, and so we often have conversations, and we also often share our expertise we have with those that are a little younger than us. And one of the things that I am a big proponent of is evaluating how you were fathered or how you were mentored and so forth, and recognize whether or not some of that, what parts of those things were good, what parts of those things maybe were not so good, and what parts of those things that you experienced may not work for your child. There's no one way to raise a child. You're not going to get everything right because every child has a million different personality traits, and you're not going to be able to cater to all of them. But if you know that there was something that you experienced that you don't want your child to experience, and you recognize that it was a problem, then you have the ability to change it. And those things that helped you to really grow and become strong and be the person that you are, you have the ability to also reinforce that with your children, and to recognize the nuances in your children that may require a different type of love and a different type of rearing. And so that's the biggest thing that I share with other fathers, and that other fathers have shared with me when I was first starting out.
Wow. Uh, it was I had this question that I wanted to really. I'm going to start with Ken on this question. Raising all three of you, and I know have raised or are raising girls, okay, or females, girls. Um, and I know a couple of you have sons. As a father, what were some of the ways you raised them differently? And I'll start with, because I know Percy has um, boys and girls, if I'm not mistaken. And I know Ken is raising. Ken has a child who's what, 24? You said, get ready to be 24. And the other, and how old is Nairobi? Nairobi is what, 2, maybe 3. So
I
tell
have
me,
Anaya who is 15, and Nairobi who is 4. And we have the one that's coming out. It's gonna be a girl as well.
yeah. So tell me how the difference in how you're raising Nairobi versus how you raised your son.
This is hilarious. So it's a big difference. It's a big difference. I think my son, since it was my first child, I was very, nurturing. I was trying not to make mistakes. I know, Gemma said, he felt at, felt like he felt at fatherhood. I think that's every father's fear. They don't want to be a failure at fatherhood. So I think with my son, I was very cautious in what I told him, how I spoke to him, how I disciplined him. I was very cautious on all that, and I was just afraid to make mistakes. I think with my daughter, um, I had it when I was, in the mid to late 30s. I had a career. I had went through school. I had made so many mistakes. Trying to be perfect as a father. I kind of knew going into this one exactly how to take that approach with raising her. So I wanted to keep the same, nurturing effects, but at the same time, I wanted to make sure I shower her with personality, shower her with, being able to vocalize herself. I want to make sure she understood that I was a supporting cast. I was here to, you know, make her a better human being. So I think that's the only different approach. I don't know if it's because it was a girl or a boy. I just think it was just based on me and where I was in my life and at what juncture of my career I was. And if I was finding that she was well off, or if I was too young to understand, I hadn't went through those climaxes and pits in my life. So I think that how you raise your child also is based on where you are as a person in your life. Uh, that answers the question. I hope it answers the question.
So are you? I gotta follow with this. Are you thinking about? Because you said it based upon where you are in your life. Are you thinking about when she starts dating, and are you gonna have a gun, or
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say once again goes to the age, right? The younger me, if I had a daughter when I was in my early 20s, all right, I think I'd be trying to terrify every little boy that came around. Um, Now my goal is to teach her what a lady is, based, with her mom teaching her, the women stuff, of me teaching her what she should expect from a man and how she should carry herself. I feel like when my daughter gets old enough to, to date, one thing, she's going to be very transparent with me. She's very, 'cause we have those conversations now. She's going to be very vocal with me, what's going on in her life every day. And then she's going to be very knowledgeable about men and guys. And I'm going to have to trust and make right decisions and not be, the one that's walking around with a gun, telling the little boy that I'm going to, shoot him if he treats my daughter wrong. I'm going to be more fearful for the boys who she gets in contact with versus fearful for her, if that makes sense.
So, which leads me to I don't know why I'm stuck here, but I'm here. Um, all three of you have daughters. So how do you how are you teaching your daughters in terms of what to expect from, I mean, what from a man or from a male? What are some things that you have done, Percy? Because I think your daughter's grown. And what are some things that you all are doing, Ken and John, with your daughters in terms of what I'm talking about, how showing exemplifying how they should expect to be treated from anyone that they would potentially date and or marry. What are some things that you all are doing? I'll start with John here.
Well, again, my daughter's 6, and so there's some things that I can model and demonstrate without necessarily giving context as of right now, and then there are some things that I can actually talk to her about and kind of at least at a low basal level, so that she can kind of plant that seed. One of the things that I try to make sure she understands is if she ever needs any help, she can come to me, and I'd rather you come to me after you've tried to work it out. I'd rather you come to me than to not do anything about it or just give up on it. And so she's learning to try to work things out on her own, and then if she can't, she comes to dad. She's also learning, for example, when we get in the car, she's learning how to do things for herself, but she's also learning how to ask dad for help. And she'll say help if she needs it. And I'll be there for her. I want her to be independent, but I also want her to be interdependent. I don't want her to get that superwoman syndrome down the line where she feels like she can't trust anybody, so she's got to do it all by herself. But I also want her to know that if she needs help, that there are people that love her, particularly her dad, that she can go to. So I want her to be independent, but I also want her to be interdependent and learn how to build those skills. And that's something that we can work on at the age of 6. And then when we get to the point where she has her first little boyfriend and so forth, we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Good answer. And the reason why I'm asking this question is because of the things that I'm thinking about for young girls, for example, when you get ready to get into the car, you open the door, okay? Or when or you have a day set aside where you all may go, just may take her to lunch or may take her to breakfast or something. Those kind of things that models how they should be treated moving forward, by anybody really, that showing respect and love to them in those kinds of ways. Percy, what are some things that you did with your daughter?
I have to admit, Boomy, I've worked in public health for the past 25 years in the Office of Adolescent Health. So I teach sexuality and sexual development. So I've been extremely open with all three of my daughters. They are adults. I made a covenant with them that when they reached that point that I would be accessible, that we could, talk about anything. And if they didn't feel comfortable talking to me, that I would put them in front of people, professionals that they could speak to if they couldn't talk to their mothers or aunts or cousins of that nature. But one of the most important things that I've noticed with our young women today, and it's extremely important, especially in this day and age of, TikTok and shaking this and moving that and things of that nature, is to make more importance of their self-esteem, of their identity, of themselves, and allow that to be the central focus in terms of how they interact with young men or as they go into their relationships. We often put the cart before the horse, so to speak, in terms of finding a man, or this is what a man is supposed to do. But I encourage my girls to find out what it is they like, what it is they wanted, who they are, and then let a man kind of evolve and kind of reflect and rotate around that. So in short, to make it short, I did more listening than talking in the earlier years to kind of help them understand within themselves who they were. And then once they got an idea of who they were from a personality standpoint, then proceed outwardly. But I just encourage them to allow the world to kind of rotate around them, not to put them on a pedestal, but we all do with our daughters, but just to kind of understand the importance of self-esteem. And I'll end with this. I was watching Oprah with my wife, and she said something that spoke with me. This was maybe 20 years ago. She said, "You teach people how to treat you." And that's something that I took to heart and I inspired in my daughters.
Wow, and that's such a great lesson. One of the things I do want to touch on is mentorship, because I don't want to, because I know all three of you are mentors and you work with college students, high school students, elementary students. I know that you do a lot of mentoring. Ken, I know that you mentor. I think you. I'm assuming you're still doing. You coach um, football, youth football. What are some of the things that you try to instill in the kids that you're mentoring, even though they're not your biological kids, they are in some way, you are a father figure in their life, in their lives. What are some of the things that you try to instill in those young people that you mentor?
It's a good question. So just some background on that, right? So I had a nonprofit since I was 27, and that nonprofit is still ongoing. To your question, Boomy. I didn't always coach. So I've overseen the nonprofit, and that nonprofit is in the inner city community, and we usually do about 250, 350 boys, athletes, per year, and about 150 girls, right? So when I was there on the field every day for those 10 years, we were doing in that 10 years span, we probably did like 3,000 some kids. I would say majority of it was young boys. Sometimes it was hard when I wasn't coaching because I wasn't directly tied to the kids, so I couldn't directly, mentor them every day. But I'll tell you how that rolled into where I'm at now in life, right? So when we started this program and when I was on the field, I think for a lot of my kids, when I talk to them now, a lot of those kids when I started when I was probably six are now 18, 19, now a lot of them are in college now. And they come back and they tell me, they say, you were the first, black male I seen that was like an executive figure. You came out there, you dressed well, you spoke to us, and you put me on your level, and you taught me about financial literacy. You told me I be doing this when I'm getting older. You told me I should be making these decisions when X, Y, and Z. And a lot of their parents throughout their life will follow with me, right? Even if they left the program or they stopped playing football, I would get check-ins when they would say, "Hey, can you come to my daughter's birthday party? Or can you come to my son's party?" And I would see these kids grow throughout their entire life cycle, right? So I have a lot of kids that I've seen that went from, you know, 5 years old until 22, 23. And it's just weird for me sometimes too, because before that I did the Boys and Girls Club as an athletic director. And those kids are now in their 30s. So it's really weird for me to see these young men who I mentor at very short age grow from those young child and me giving them advice and me telling them to follow the right path and them actually listening and following that path and now are in their profession, are now in their careers and now doing a lot of great things. We have athletes, we have lawyers, we have doctors. I have one kid, Jaden, who came back this year. He just graduated from college. He was a football athlete. Jaden was one of my first athletes that I had on my team, and that was a team of like 14 kids. It wasn't a big team. I was coaching because we didn't have a coach. And Jaden came out with his mom and played, and then didn't end up being a very good high school player. Went to college on a scholarship, played football, and he hurt his knee. And now he has just got his master's degree. And the first thing he did when he came back after his degree, he called me up out of the blue. This was probably a month ago, and he said, "Hey, Coach Ken, can you mentor me? Can you sit down with me and show me what I need to do right now to get to the next step of my life?" And I brought him back to the program and I said, "I want you to kind of run this program now where you started at. I want you to learn the basis of this program." So I think that is what mentorship looks like to me in the whole scheme of things. It's from taking those young kids and young men and young ladies in some cases and watching them grow and develop throughout their entire lives, making them feel safe enough to come back at some point to say, I, you know, uh, you were a mentor to me, and I want to verbally, be under you, and I want you to continue to guide me throughout my life.
Wow. John, what are some things that what are some lessons that you impart to those you mentor?
So, with those that I mentor, that I have the blessing of mentoring, there are two things that I really try to impart. The first thing is um, I try to be what I didn't have, as well as a model of what I did have, and try to emulate that for the next group. And so that's the first thing. If there's something that I didn't see that would have benefited me, I try to make sure that some of those gaps I intercede on behalf of those that I try to mentor for. But the second thing is I try to make sure that everyone understands that they have a duty to those that come behind them. So that "pay it forward" motto isn't just a saying. Is something that we should all live and strive for. And so I mentor the kids and young men and young ladies that I mentor. I mentor them in a way that hopefully they also see the value of what I've been able to do with them, so that they can go and do that for someone else. And that's how we continue to grow the excellence in our community. And so those are the two things I try to impart in them.
Thank you. Percy, tell me some lessons that you hope to impart to those you mentor.
I like Ken's perspective in terms of the levels of it. You know, there are times where you work directly with the kids. I remember my early years as an elementary school teacher. And then I also ran a nonprofit where I was mentoring college students who were mentoring young people. And so, it's just levels to it. And I'll speak to the young mentors. And I keep sounding like the elder statesman here, but I'll just take it. I guess that's my role tonight. Is unfortunately in our society, Boomy, we're at a place where black male presence is somewhat of a commodity now. It's so rare and precious that we just don't have enough. We're there, not enough fathers, not enough coaches, not enough black male teachers. And so I encourage and I even caution young men like Ken and John to be careful and not let our egos and compassion burn us out in a sense. And, it's hard, it's difficult. I remember being a young mentor wanting to save every kid. I taught at an elementary school in Houston where there were 600 students and two black teachers. And I would try to be a father to, 600 kids, and I just realized that I had to be, a little more wise in my doings, and really kind of streamline that, so to speak. And I don't want to say, and it sounds harsh, but you can't save them all in a sense. And I like to do a few things very well, then a lot of things mediocre. And so, that's just kind of wanted to sprinkle that out there to any of the young professionals that may be listening, that we have to be careful because we have our families and our children and our circles that have to be taken care of as well. And so it's a very careful balancing act. And it requires that level perspective that Ken talked about, of understanding your place and where you are and kind of focusing on the transition and the changes that need to take place so you can be the best version of whatever mentor that you can be.
Wow. Which leads me to this question, because this question, because it does take, I believe, um, some level of spiritual influence, if you will, to be good at anything, really, to be successful in anything. That's my opinion. I also at the same time, there are some fathers who are doing great jobs who are not religious, who don't go to church or mosque or temple, uh, but they're good fathers. Um, my dad was not a church goer, but he was a good. When I say was, he's still with us, but I'm using was in terms of growing, helping to grow us up. He was a very good father. He didn't go to church with us. He didn't go to church. What role do spirituality play in your life as a father, if any? I'll start with John.
So, one of the things that I will say is that for a while I had gotten a little bit um, I got a little bit disgruntled with religion and things like that, especially after what I shared about my son. So when my daughter came, I realized, and it took me some therapy. I'll go ahead and be honest with you. It took me some therapy before she came, and really reconnecting to the spirituality and the foundation that my mom and my dad put in me when I was younger. I had to come back to it. And fortunately, I've been able to get back to some of it as my daughter was born. And that is really helping me to have the strength to remember when things get tough, I need to, well, for me, when things get tough, I need to remember to pray. I need to remember to reflect. And then I need to, I don't need to rush and jump or respond to everything so quickly without necessarily giving it to God and my higher power. And so that's kind of where I am. And it took me going that circuitous route, kind of moving away from what I grew up knowing, but then having to come back to it and having it now become a new a renewed source of strength for me, especially when it comes to dealing with my daughter. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. Ken, what role does spirituality play, if any? You've been in you
Um,
raising your children.
yeah, I mean, we grew up like hip to arm booming, so you kind of know like our family, in a sense. We were all, all of our, we come from a large family, brothers and sisters, my mom including, right? She grew up in the church, so we were church going. I think a lot of my child, all I remember is going to church. 3 to 4 days a week, right? We wasn't Jehovah Witnesses, so it was a lot of church. And I think with my mom, she laid that foundation about praying, right? And I think with my mom also, I saw her. I didn't always hear the prayer. I just knew that she was covered us, right? And I think from her being such a great person, a great human being, it bounded onto me, and I think I use that as a source, right? Um, I don't go to church at all right now, and it's not because I have this conflict with religion. It's just I believe that there's a higher power. I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe in the Lord, and I believe in prayer. But I believe the foundation that was laid upon me from my family and my mother built me to be a self-standing person, and I think all that plays a part in my where I stand religion. Um, I think a lot of men, I think to your point where I think John, right? Um, he said he had to get therapy because of the loss of his son. I don't think a lot of people understand how much stress men go through and how much things we go through on a day to day when it comes to being that provider for our families. We rely on religion a lot, meaning that we pray a lot, right? We don't always and it's kind of frowned upon for man, to be praying in front of people and be very vulnerable. But at the same time, we do have strong religion, and I think that's a covenant for a lot of black men. I think we definitely believe and try to be the most religious people we can to be better people in life.
Very good. Thank you so much for that response. Percy.
Yeah, Boomy, we're similar in the sense that my father was agnostic, if I would say, and I struggled. I struggled with my belief early, with, that. age-old question of, if God is so great, how can he let bad things happen to good people? And I watched my mother, my parents were divorced when I was 6, and I watched my mother struggle and go through some illnesses, and it jaded me. I had a really challenge with it. But it's when I became a father, it's kind of when I really like understood the love that our creator has for us in terms of forgiveness. When how much you love your children, there's nothing that they can do that can change that love. And how you also have to be strict and stern and sometimes let them hurt and stay in hurtful situations to learn lessons. And one quick story I'll share is teaching my daughters to swim, and they were scared to death, but I would, be kind of harsh and not hold them and make them relax and learn, because I needed them to develop that skill, because it may save their life. And it was only when they trusted me enough to let go did they actually learn how to swim. And I think about that often, especially as a grandfather now. And that just informs my faith. Just I don't think that there is a closer example of God's love for us than found in that of a father for his children. And so I just kind of allow that to guide me in terms of being patient and compassionate and seeking and giving forgiveness.
Uh, Thank you so much for that response. I have three more questions that I want to ask to all three of you. If you could say one thing to your father, what would that one thing be? And I'll start with John.
So the one thing I would say to my father is, there's nothing that you could do on this side of earth that would make me turn my back on you. Um, like I said, my dad has been my rock and my biggest supporter. But it wasn't perfect, and there were some times where we went through some things, some struggles, that fathers may sometimes have with their sons, especially when the sons start smelling themselves, start walking a little different, get a little swag on them. But there were some times that we bumped heads majorly, and even now we still have playful arguments and such. But there's nothing on this side of earth that he could ever do that would make me turn my back on him. I do love him unconditionally because loves me unconditionally, and with that as our basis, I think that that has allowed us to be able to be pretty much best friends at this point in my life, and so that's what I would tell him. I've never told him that, but that's what I would tell him.
Ken, you could tell your father one thing, or a father figure, or a mentor one thing. What would that be?
It was me, boy. Me, I didn't hear you. I cut
Yes,
off at the
yes.
beginning. Oh, um, I think for my father, I would probably just say thank you. I mean, I lost my dad when, like I said, when I was 13. He was very involved in my life, so he was very and it was funny because people say all the time when people are ready to leave you, they kind of know. So I think the last time I see my father, he gave me this big talk about being transparent with your kids and about having a conversation with your kids about things that you do that people might frown upon. So we had this big conversation. And he kind of told me about himself that I might have been hearing, and he was like, "Let me just tell you what this is and what's going on." And he had this big conversation. At the time, I was like, I'm 13. I don't want to hear all this. What are you talking about? I look back now and I realized that. Um, I'm thankful for that conversation. I'm thankful for all the information that he gave me, throughout my childhood, from my adulthood, from my uncle. Um, my uncle when he passed, he had a stroke. And at first it was just a light stroke, and he was in the hospital. And he had a more massive stroke one evening. But before he had the massive stroke, I was able to talk to him. We had a lot of conversation. And I think in that conversation, I told him thank you. You know what I'm saying? Like I told me he scared me, but I told him also I'm appreciative of him. So I feel like I got that communication out to him. I was able to, have closure with him and be able to communicate with him. And I think that was important for my mental health and for me. And I realized me doing that, the way that I coped and I breathed is totally different than I would have if I didn't have that conversation.
Percy, what's one thing
Yes.
you would say to your father?
Ken stole my answer. It would be thank you, a simple thank you. But I would also add that by saying um, thank you for not always being there when I wanted you, or when I wanted him, but always being there when I needed him, and being present enough to know the difference. And then lastly, I would probably say I'm sorry again. And I even kind of get choked up saying this because there were some times where I wasn't that nice to my dad, and disrespectful, and probably unappreciative. And as a father, that hurts. That's painful. I've experienced that with my own children. And I had to backtrack. And I was finding myself doing it like every time I saw him and just calling him. And he just said, "Son, stop. Don't ever tell me you're sorry anymore. I get it." But I just felt compelled to, so I probably would just tell him one last time, "I'm sorry, Pop."
Wow. So, a couple more questions. Um, 20 years from now, I want you to think about the age of your children 20 years from now. What is the one thing you want them to know about you or appreciate about you or remember about you 20 years from now? Start with Ken.
I would say, that I tried. I think that's the most important thing. I think with your kids, and I was looking at myself when I was 20, right? I think with my mom, working 3 jobs and, doing everything she can, to make sure we never had to ask for anything. I think when you're growing up, you see that, and you either two type of kids. You an appreciative kid, or you a kid who don't see that. You see it when you're older. I think I was able to do both. I think when I was very young, I became very independent because I see my mom give so much. So I want to teach my kids the same. I want my kids to be the same way 20 years from now. I want them to be able to say that I see my dad work hard. I see my dad provide for us, and I see my dad, make life easier for us. Right? I know you mentioned, we travel, and I see the world, and my kids do too. I take my daughter, we try to take them when we can. As she get older, she's gonna go more vacations with us, but we want to see the world. I want to come back and look 20 years from now and see that, that life is not a life that everybody gets. And she gets that because our parents pour into her and we support her and we wanted that foundation for her. So that's what I want her to see and feel 20 years from now.
John.
I'll keep it simple. I just hope that when someone interviews my daughter about fatherhood, she's able to think her thoughts are fond thoughts. Um, and that's if 20 years from now, when she reflects on our relationship, it brings her joy to think about it, then I'll be happy. And even if we have tough times, I still think that our relationship will be a joyous one, and I keep the faith that it will be. And that's what I'm hoping 20 years from now she'll be able to say.
Wow. You all giving some great answers. Percy.
I would have to say, and I've kind of that stuff that Ken and John are idealizing now. I've kind of lived because all four of my children are adults, so I've kind of been through that phase of, there's kind of a phase where all your children at one point kind of blame their parents for some of their problems, in a sense. And I would just hope that they know that I was imperfect, that I made mistakes, but I always tried to treat people with respect. And that one of my greatest lessons before I leave this earth is that I learned that it's really not about me, and that I hope that they reach that same point in their journey as well.
Wow. Last but not least, when you hear the phrase fathers and figures, what do you think of? John, you hear that phrase, fathers and figures.
it makes me think about the individuals who are the bedrocks of community, right? I think about growing up here in Albany in particular. I think about the coaches that I had. I think about the teachers that I had, the black male teachers, which I didn't have a lot growing up. I only had a couple through grade school. I had much more in college. But my coaches, the principals, the mentoring groups, every fraternity in Albany had a mentoring group, and they mentored every child. They didn't make us. They didn't necessarily at the time make us decide which group we were going to side with or whatever. They mentored everybody, and so we really had a community where all of the men mentored all of the kids. And so, when I think of fathers and figures, I think about those men who are bedrocks in the community, and they're not always, like you mentioned earlier, they're not always. Fathers in the strictest sense of the word. Some of them may not have ever had kids of their own, but they brought joy in being mentors and being strength for other young children in the community. And so that's what I think of, those men who are bedrocks of the community.
Ken, what do you? What does that
And that
phrase
was
fathers and figures mean to you personally? What does that mean?
um that was a good response for John. And I think the wordplay on it is great, right? Fathers and figures, it's like father figures. Anybody who is like a male who provides that, like you said, bedrock and that guidance and that foundation for, young people or people in distress. Or, I mean, you can be an adult, right? Like my son is 20, turning 23, 24. And there's times that I talk to, people that's his age, that they tell me, they look up to me as like a father figure. So I think that word is a double, is how you say double entendre. I might be saying it wrong. But yeah, it's one of those things where it has various meanings, and it can mean many things. But I think the foundation of it is somebody who provides guidance and is a mentor and is a father figure in their life.
In person.
Yeah, double entendre. We got you, Ken. We got you. um, when I think of father figures, Boomy, being a native of Albany, there are two names that come to mind, and the old school Albany people are gonna get these two. There was a teacher in East Albany at Jackson Heights Elementary in the 70s by the name of Harry Manning, who embodied that what I spoke of earlier of one single elementary school teacher, black male, who was a father to an entire school. And he ruled with an iron fist, but he also loved with compassion. And he left an imprint on thousands of young black males in East Albany in the 70s, and I'm sure on into the 80s. Rest in peace. And then second is my defensive backs coach. I went to Monroe High School class of '84, and that's Coach Winfred Benson. He was the first man who loved me enough outside of my father to hurt me, to hurt my feelings, to push me, but do it in a loving and firm manner. And I love both of them. They were very instrumental in my lives, and they just really exemplify that term, father figures.
Wow. And I've heard of both of those men. So, wow. Thank you all so much for doing this episode. I think it's going to be it's for me a very powerful experience. Thank you for being great fathers. Again, not perfect fathers. We're not talking about perfect fathers. We're talking about great fathers, fathers who have learned from fathering and who are passing on what they've learned to other up and coming fathers and fathers who've mentored other young people who mentor young people who are now becoming productive citizens in our culture and in our society. We're talking about black men who are great men, men who are courageous, men who are effective, men who are loving, men who are caring, men who are compassionate, not just about their own kids, but about other people's kids. And so thank you all so much for doing this. This I am just elated and overwhelmed by some of the things that I've heard tonight. And so to my audience, thank you for watching this. When you watch it, thank you for watching it. And please, please, please feel free to share, make comments, send emails, posts on social media this particular show because I love seeing our black men being elevated and highlighted and featured. And so again, thank each of you for joining me tonight. And I look forward to seeing even greater things from you and your children and your children's children. Because I'm probably still going to be here. No, from your children and your children's children. Thank you all so much for joining me tonight. God bless all of you.